What's the most heroic trait you can think of? Strength, compassion, bravery? It's honestly hard to imagine a hero who doesn't embody all of this and more. But you don't have to imagine, because Edge of Tomorrow already showed us exactly what it looks like when a story's fate falls in the hands of a coward. Private William Cage is the antithesis of everything we want to see in a hero. He's weak, selfish, scared, and perfect. Wait, perfect? Yes, from a writing standpoint, he is. Starting him as far as possible from a hero makes him the perfect candidate to inevitably become a hero. This is because it creates a clear opportunity to showcase change. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. If we want to make a cowardly hero, we can't overlook the first step, making a coward. Cowardly characters walk a fine line between being empathetic, being annoying, and being downright despicable. In Cage's case, when an unstoppable alien race crash lands on Earth and decimates humanity for 5 years straight, you can't really blame him for not wanting to join the battle. In fact, he's not even a trained soldier, he's just a media guy. His fear is completely rational, which honestly makes it relatable. In this sense, he's reminiscent of beloved characters like Courage the Cowardly Dog or Shaggy and Scooby-Doo. These characters consistently find themselves in terrifying situations where the most reasonable thing they can do is actually just run away. And while we might not hang up posters of these characters in our childhood bedrooms and tout them as heroes, we certainly don't dislike them or blame them for being scared. But we do dislike true cowards, because cowards aren't just scared. They're scared to a fault, and they make it other people's problems. In the same scene where we first empathize with Cage's fear, he makes a choice that suddenly reframes him from being relatable to being dishonorable. To get out of his call of duty, which is actually just a photo op, Cage threatens to blackmail the general. Not only is this mutiny, but it also says that he values his own life far more than the lives of the soldiers going to fight. Now this is approaching true cowardice. He's not just scared, but also selfish, unjust even, and that's an important step. Putting an injustice on screen creates a sense of imbalance among the audience, a tension that we need to see resolved, a wrong we need to see made right. And when it comes to hooking your audience, this tension is nothing short of genius. While Courage, Shaggy, and Scooby are scared but lovable, the other side of the coin are characters who exist to be hated. Think Cypher in The Matrix, who chooses to run from the truth, Dr. Man in Interstellar, who gives up all hope on the mission, and Jerry from Fargo, who's a nervous wreck from the very first scene. Yes, these characters are all scared, and some rightfully so, but that's not what makes them cowards, and it's not what makes them hated. What all of these cowards have in common is that they deliberately put innocent characters in harm's way. With Cypher, it's one thing to take the blue pill, but it's another to pay for it with his team's lives. With Dr. Man, it's one thing to retreat back home to Earth, but it's another to do it knowing his rescuers can't return with him. And with Jerry Lundegaard, well, honestly, he was awful from the start. Sure, we can empathize with his desperation for money, but as soon as we realize he's putting his wife's life in jeopardy, we instantly recognize that this guy is a bona fide coward, and we want to see justice. When all of these characters finally meet their rightful downfalls, it relieves that tension and restores balance to the story, which makes for admittedly satisfying moments. But where does Private Cage fall in the mix? He's certainly no lovable weakling, but it'd be a bit extreme to hate him. Sure, his threat to blackmail the general is an embarrassingly desperate gamble, but it doesn't actually put anyone at risk of harm like those true cowards did. With those true cowards from earlier, we want to see them pay for their sins. Their actions can't be reversed, so the only path to justice is through punishment. Intense, right? Anyway, Cage's path to justice isn't so black and white. He never passes that point of no return where justice could only ever mean his death or imprisonment. Instead, he remains human enough to sympathize with, while still annoying enough to create tension and imbalance. He's just innocent enough to be redeemable, while still guilty enough to need a push. Like, a strong push. So in perfect karmic balance, the story forces him to confront his fears head on. He's shipped off to battle with no ifs or buts. And just like that, the story has crafted a coward that the audience can still somehow get behind. Now the fun part really begins. We turn this coward character into a hero. The cowardly hero is a uniquely rare phenomenon because it's a bit of an oxymoron, and frankly shouldn't even be possible. Like I said at the start, Private Cage is essentially the antithesis of what it means to be a hero. Traditionally, we know that heroes save lives, inspire good, and fight for those in need. And of course, Cage does none of that. But to make matters worse, Cage doesn't even fit the hero bill in the much more broad context of storytelling. Heroes, also known as protagonists, are the characters who are the hearts of their stories. They're the emotional anchors for audiences to latch onto, making stories possible in the first place. I'm not exaggerating when I say that with no protagonist, there is no story, which is why getting them right is so crucial. After analyzing all of my favorite protagonists, I found 3 core traits that they all use to push their stories forward. Longtime viewers can say them with me now: competence, resolve, and influence. Protagonists need these 3 traits in order to keep a story going when no other character can. They need the ability to overcome challenges, the impact to incite change, and the driving motivation to guide them through. These 3 traits are so non-negotiable that I've gone and put them on a ternary plot that I dubbed the protagonist mix. Is it confusing? Yeah, a little bit, but it works. Using this chart, we can visualize which traits a hero already has and which they inevitably need. The goal is to reach the middle of the chart, where they balance each trait equally and become the masters of their story's fate. More often than not, a hero will rely on 1 or 2 of these traits, and the story will be about their process in gaining the third. However, as some commenters have pointed out, when a character has none of the chart's 3 traits, they would technically fall in the middle because of the way the chart's weighted. Normally, I just ignore these comments because no story could possibly exist with such a pathetic hero. But then I saw Edge of Tomorrow. At the start of his story, Cage has 0 competence, 0 resolve, and 0 influence. He can't fight, he sure as hell doesn't want to, and nobody around him cares. He's so pathetic that he literally breaks my chart. For all intents and purposes, he should not be a protagonist. To prove my point, let's follow his story and see how long he lasts. Okay, so he gets sent to the barracks against his will, everyone dismisses and belittles him, he barely makes it to the beach for battle, and he's literally dead within the first 20 minutes of screen time. Some story, huh? That's why I say this chart works. There's no way around the truth that these 3 traits are essential. When a protagonist doesn't have any of them, then they simply have no way to move their story forward, and it ends. But the thing is, I didn't make the chart with a restrictive, you must be this tall to ride type mentality. It's actually the opposite. The protagonist mix is meant to give any character the opportunity to be the hero, and that even includes losers like Cage. But with such a long way to go, a coward like him would need to undergo a greater change than any 2-hour movie could ever reasonably offer, if only there was some loophole for him to exist outside of time. Time loops are, ironically, one of the most timeless storytelling devices around, especially when it comes to creating heroes out of characters who are anything but. Take the most recognizable example in Groundhog Day, which tells such a beloved story that its namesake has become a synonym for time loop. Funnily enough, the protagonist fills one of the only other examples I can think of when it comes to characters like Cage who have no business leading stories. At the start of the movie, Phil is an egotistical, insincere grump. But just because he's unlikable doesn't make him unworthy to be the main character. The problem is that he has no story in him. He has no particular goal that he clings to with resolve, his influence only goes as far as the weekly weather report, and I wouldn't count sarcasm as competence. But everything changes when he wakes up one morning to find the prior day repeating. You can call this newfound power influence in the sense that he's a chosen one who naturally attracts a story. You could call it competence in the sense that he has this uniquely powerful ability that lets him live without consequences. You could even call it resolve, in the sense that it simply won't stop. Regardless of how we describe it, the time loop suddenly takes the most uninteresting character and glues us to our seats to watch his story pan out. It gives him literally all of the time in the world to develop those central traits and become the hero he's meant to be, which cues us back to Edge of Tomorrow. When an alien spills its guts all over Cage, he too gets his time loop ability, and just like that, his story goes on, and on, and on. With each iteration of his life, he becomes a little more competent at fighting. He grows a little more resolve toward winning the war, and while most characters don't believe a word he says, he eventually gains influence when he finds Rita, a soldier who knows exactly what he's going through. If you ask me, this is when the story really kicks off, because Cage makes his first real choice. Rita breaks down the rules of his time loop, and explains to Cage that there are 2 ways out. The first way is a blood transfusion. This removes the alien blood from Cage, and the power goes with it. The second way is much more complicated. He'll have to live, die, and repeat countless times until they finally locate the Omega alien and take it down. Had Cage been given this information at the very start, I think it's clear he would have taken the coward's way out and gotten his blood swapped. But because the story had already propelled him forward against his will, he had developed into the type of character who would take on the challenge. And so he chooses to fight. What's really crazy is that this entire development took thousands of hours for Cage's character, but a whopping 10 minutes of screen time. While that's a strong testament to the power of the time loop, it's also a signal to us about what it really takes for a coward to become a hero, at least according to the movie. Becoming a hero isn't just becoming the best soldier around. If it was, the movie would already be over. Instead, for Cage to truly redeem himself, defeating the Omega was going to take more than just perfect execution and pseudo-immortality. It would require true heroism, and whatever that may cost. One of the best ways to create change in a protagonist is to challenge them. One of the best ways to challenge them is using an antagonist, a villain if you will. But villains can come in all different shapes and sizes. To determine the villain that best fits the hero, we have to determine what aspect of the hero we're looking to change. And for that, yep, I've got a whole other chart. My antagonist drill breaks down all of villainy into 3 different layers, each targeting a deeper aspect of the hero. As we established earlier, cowards' main problems stem from their values. They put themselves before other people. So if we use a dilemma antagonist to target their values, we can directly measure how much they've changed. And that's precisely what the aliens do in Edge of Tomorrow. They act as Cage's test. So long as the Omega is still standing, Cage is still a coward. It doesn't matter how skilled Cage is on the battlefield. It doesn't matter how badly he wants it. The mimics still have the same time loop power as he does, meaning there's no magic number of iterations he'll have to go through until he can finally win. They're just too tough of a challenge. But they can be defeated. It'll just come with a cost. Unlike the top layer, obstacles, which can be overcome by the hero's abilities, the dilemma layer isn't so forgiving. In fact, to kick off the final act, Cage accidentally breaks the time loop when he inadvertently receives a blood transfusion, proving that this story was never a question of ability. It was always about his values. As essential as the time loop was for giving Cage the necessary spark, it wasn't the only reason we were engaged with his story. His shortcomings were just as important. Earlier, we talked about how true cowards hook the audience because we simply must watch them get their comeuppance. They rub us the wrong way, so we want to see the story get them back. This is why the time loop is such an appropriate tool for writing undeserving heroes. It takes a flawed character and enables them to redeem themselves. Throughout the entire course of the movie, the time loop had gifted Cage with the opportunity to grow in every way but one. He could fight harder, act kinder, and care deeper, but because he was never truly at risk of dying, he could never become braver. And what's the opposite of cowardice? Bravery. Which is why gaining this power was only the second best thing that could have happened to him. The first best thing was losing it, because it finally gave him an opportunity to change in the way he needed to most. With no crutch to fall back on, it was finally time to put all of his character development to the test. Using all of the personal details he gradually learned about his crew, he was able to influence them to join in the final stand. Using his combat expertise, his competence saved their skin as they landed right in the belly of the beast. And finally, using his resolve to save the human race, he exhibited true bravery and sacrificed himself to take out the Omega. In this final test of his values, he put other people before himself, solidifying his change from coward to hero. And that was the real story in Edge of Tomorrow. Because as cool as a time loop war against aliens sounds, it would be nothing without the deeper story of the characters and the narrative. If you like how I break these aspects down using charts, I've put together a 32-page PDF on my Patreon with every chart I've ever made. It's basically the full toolkit I use to make videos like this. You'll also get monthly bonus content where I share the best thing I watched that month and why it stood out. If you can't support me on Patreon, no worries. Just hit the like and subscribe button and we'll call it even. As always, thanks for watching. Peace.